Josh and Christy, it's so great to have you on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thanks for joining me.
We're so happy to be here, Davey.
It's an honor. Thank you.
This is going to be such a rich conversation. Like, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you're at, you got to understand, like, we just spent probably the last 20 minutes just talking, realized, oh my gosh, we've got to start recording. And I'm just so excited for you guys as you're listening to this and you're watching this, what God is going to do in your hearts as you listen to Josh and Christy, because, man, they're just spilling over with just the presence of God, the Holy Spirit. It's so cool to see and even just kind of feel this so early in the morning as we're recording this. But here's what I would love for you guys to do. I'm going to shut up so you guys can talk, because it's amazing what you guys are doing. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself, and then go ahead and dive into, here's what I'd want to know. I want to know kind of about yourself, about your family, what you guys do, but then like why you do it. What led you to this?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I'm Josh, and then Christy's here with me. We have three amazing, fun kiddos. They are 10, 8, and 2. So it's boy, girl, boy. We got a girl in the middle, 10, 8, and 2. And the 2-year-old is keeping us on our toes at this season of our lives. But we have an organization and a ministry called Famous at Home. And really, we started this because there was a lot of, I would receive calls as a crisis responder. So I had a training in crisis response. One of the most frequent calls I would receive were phone calls related to a moral or ethical failure of some type in a business leader, a ministry leader, or something of that nature. And they were calling me to say, hey, can you come help us get our family back in sorts? And then there was obviously the fallout of whatever it was that they were leading, and employees or congregations or whatever. And it was heartbreaking because what I found over and over and over again was this chase, this pursuit of something else for identity purpose, for affirmation, that type of thing. And home was always getting put in the back burner because the dopamine bump, when you're on a stage or you're doing, whatever job it is that you're doing, and you're getting accolades from a board member or, a client or a fan or whatever, that dopamine bump is way stronger than sitting on the floor and playing Chutes and Ladders with an opponent who has no idea which way is up and which way is down. Like, it's like your presence at home, or to flip that into the spousal relationship where you're getting accolades at work, but you come home and you're not getting accolades from your spouse because things at home feel chaotic. And so one of the greatest phrases I would hear is, I can go to work and lead hundreds of people and I come home and I don't even know how to manage my own family. And it was just heartbreaking to us to see that, because when you look at research, you obviously filter this through the lens of Scripture, you genuinely see that when we prioritize home, everything else falls into place. That when you, and you're already famous at home, you are famous at home. I mean, the phrase that we use often on our podcast is, the greatest red carpet you'll ever walk is through your front door. And it's like at the end of life, these are the end of life regrets that people have, is, I wish I wouldn't have worked as much. I wish I would have spent more time. I wish I would have been more present. And so that's really our heart, is to be able to do that, and to really help families understand you're already famous at home. And the double entendre there is, you can be famous at home because you already are. Like, as a son and daughter of Jesus Christ, you are already famous at home. You are so deeply loved. And it's out of receiving that love that we can then go love our families well, and then go out and do what God has called us to do. And so we just really help families get out of that cultural tide of the chase, if you will, and the messages that they're believing. And we've all believed. I mean, gosh, we've been there, and it's part of our story.
Right.
But that's really kind of where our heart is, in helping families and leaders. And we do a lot with military. We do a lot with Joint Special Operations Command, and then organizations and churches and that type of thing. So it's been a huge honor. The coolest part for us is we get to do it together. It obviously has its pros and cons, but I think you'd say it has way more pros than cons at this point.
It does. I think we've worked through a lot of the cons. It took some time. But I think that's been the beauty, is like, you get the real life. Like, there's no, like, what's the point in pretending? People just want genuine, authentic connection, to realize, like, I'm not crazy. This is really hard. Or I'm struggling here. I'm stuck here. I'm wounded here. This keeps coming up in our marriage. Oh, we're not the only ones. And I think that's probably the most, beautiful realization, is we just try to be so authentic, because I want to know you. I don't want to know the false version of you that you put out to try to And we do that, right? We have these false selves that we play in order to, because we think we're going to be better accepted at work or out in the marketplace or even in friendship. And it's exhausting. And we get to a place, sort of somewhere in the midlife range where you realize, I'm so tired and I feel alone. And this is where a lot of these falls originate, is from a lot of hiding. And so we just want to pull out everything in the dark and bring it into the light, and God redeems everything. So it's just beautiful to be able to witness.
Wow. That's so cool. Well, Josh, I know you said that you were working with a lot of like crisis response in terms of moral, ethical failures. And so obviously there's a, the therapist counseling background there with you, right? And then also, Christy, same thing for you, right?
Yep.
Yes.
We met when Josh was doing his PhD in counseling and I was doing my master's. That's where we met.
That's where we met.
Okay.
We don't actually work in the counseling space as much anymore. We do more coaching.
We do a lot more coaching today. I do a lot with emotional intelligence and emotional intelligence coaching, and then marriage coaching and leadership coaching and that type of thing. We're huge fans of therapy. We go to therapy ourselves. Maintenance, just believe it's so important. We can talk a little bit more about that. But we also, when I walk into a situation like that, I've got a black book of resources that I am, helping people put a team around them in that situation, which would include therapy. It would include, a coach. It would include people that really can support the family in that process. And so that's really the role that I play, is kind of bringing puzzle pieces together to put the support in that family's life.
That's great. That's great. We talk often on the podcast and in our ministry about coaching versus counseling and how important both of them are. I think some people still don't quite understand the difference. I'd love to hear your take on what the difference between those two are and how they work in tandem to really help you as you're navigating these seasons of life.
Yeah, I mean, to simplify it, I think, coaching is that looking at the present, where are we stuck, and casting vision for the future, and how can we get to the future, how can we really put a plan, find our purpose, really get out of this feeling of stuckness. Therapy would look at the past and look at trauma, look at anxiety, depression, diagnosable mental health disorders that you're really trying to overcome and work through. And that's where the therapy side of it would be. And so one of the things that we do in our coaching is we really evaluate, do an assessment early on. Do you need therapy or do you need counseling? And a lot of people will do both at the same time. As they're doing coaching with us, we have a therapist or someone who will work with them, or they might decide, hey, we need to do therapy first before we would come to you. And so we really help people discern that. And you're right. I mean, it's important to have all of it. We have a therapist, we have coaches, we have spiritual directors, we have our pastors. It's like I was saying this yesterday to somebody, it's like we have such a plethora of support around us, but there's a reason for that. And that's because, for us, and we can get into this later, but I can sum up all of parenting research into one primary conclusion, and that's that our kids become who we are. And so if I want my, research shows that our children's emotional floor is our ceiling. Our emotional ceiling will be our children's floor. Our children will not outgrow our emotional maturity while they're under our roof. And so if I want to launch my kids into the world in an emotionally healthy way, I've got to be leveling up. And so that's what we're huge on.
Wow. We work with so many families, so many broken situations, so much trauma, so much, whether it's divorce or loss I think that for me, I would say, wow, that Josh, that's such a profound, before I lost my wife, I would say that's such a profound truth. And absolutely, I 100% agree with it. But then there are folks that they just feel so overwhelmed by the challenges or the trauma or the crisis they're facing right now, currently.
Yeah.
That they've hit their emotional capacity, and yet while they're trying to heal through or grieve through or whatever, they're trying to kind of move along in their process. They also have the responsibility of all of these little ones around too, trying to have the emotional capacity for them too. I'd love to kind of talk about two different things. Excuse me. I would love to, one, when you're in the thick of it right there, and you kind of realize, man, I've hit an emotional capacity. I'm finding myself being really short with my kids or with the people that I love around me because that trauma is kind of oozing out of me. It's coming out sideways. What do I do? That's probably the first side of the question. And then also, how do we build that kind of emotional intelligence on the front end before the crisis happens, you know? So maybe take both of those questions, like, what do we do right now in the middle of it?
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I love the way that you did it. So I'm going to take the first part of the question, and I'm going to answer that and give this kind of guilt-free drop for families and parents and people who are struggling. And then I'm going to toss it to Christy to kind of share her story when she was on the bottom rung of life and just kind of how she has pulled herself and how we have together done that through the that work. So the first thing I would say, and I think this is the nugget that I just really want to start with because I think it's really important. I'm so grateful you asked that question. John Gottman, in his research, we talk a lot about emotional safety and in the home and really having that sense of, building resilience. That's what we're doing in these situations. John Gottman did research. He's kind of like the preeminent marriage researcher in the world. Mm-hmm. What he did was he researched also emotion coaching children. And what he found was that this whole idea of emotion coaching or being emotionally safe for your kids, even if you get it right just 2 out of 5 times, all right? If you're a basketball fan, guys, Shaq shot better than 40% from the free throw line. Like 40, we just have to get it right 40% of the time, and you can still get the outcomes you desire in your kids.
Yeah.
And there was a reason for that. And what he found was it was a word called repair. And the research calls it the ultimate of relationships. What's the Bible call it? Forgiveness. And Jesus tells us to practice it a lot, 70 times 7. And so when you're human, you will say things you regret. Your limbic system will be so overwhelmed when your children are screaming and you're out of sorts and in the moment that you will meet your child's limbic overwhelm with your limbic overwhelm, and you're gonna say things you regret. You're gonna yell. When you do, your ability to get into their world at eye level and apologize for your offense, what it does is it teaches your kids, number one, that you're not perfect. Number two, it shows them that you don't expect them to be perfect. But number 3, what you're doing is you're modeling for them how to make it right. And that is the ultimate of relationships. That's the buffer, because 3 out of 5 times you probably will mess up. We all do. But if you can just get it right 2 out of 5 times, that forgiveness piece and showing our kids that we're human and that we're on this journey, what it does is it helps our kids learn how to build resilience in their own journey as well.
John, I think before you said that, I would say, hey, here's some really good advice. If you mess up, apologize to your kids. I've definitely heard that before. I've taught that before. But the fact that there's this undergirding research right there that you just brought forward, like that underscores how vital this is, like even at a soul level, right? And just what a biblical foundation of, foundational principle that this is, that like this is how God wired our bodies, our minds, our hearts, and our souls to work, and our relationships then to be able to mend or repair even when things go awry. I mean, I'm like, that's so profound. Like, I hope everybody just understood and listened. Like, this is how important that reconciliation, that repair, the forgiveness, all of those different aspects of that kind of relational repair, how important that is. It's so good, man.
And at the soul level, we had a friend, Jeannie Cunyon. We were talking with her one time, and she said it had a profound impact on me. And I've done it a few times. I'll do it from time to time with my own kids, but where she will say, would you mind if I just pray? I need to ask Jesus for forgiveness for the way that I spoke to you. Would you mind if I prayed and asked God for forgiveness, and would you pray with me? And literally going to the cross in front of your children to receive God's forgiveness, that soul level, that it's just that reconciliation. There's something about that supernaturally that I think we cannot underestimate.
Yeah. I imagine, though, I'm a parent, so I know that this has to require some bit of emotional awareness within your own self to realize in that moment, going, wait a minute, how I just responded, that's not right, right? And I know a lot of times when it comes, especially if there's like childhood trauma, family of origin issues, those kinds of things where you're like, well, this is just this, you just operate out of what you've seen. It's kind of that generational curse that kind of gets passed down. You just operate out of what you've seen, and you're not even aware that that's healthy or not. So it does take, right? I mean, explain this a little bit, like, how do we become a little bit more aware of, wait, how I just responded right there, that's not providing a safe space for my kids. What do we do to begin to do that? You know what I mean?
And safe space, like, and we talked about, he mentioned the term emotional safety. Like, that's not even a term that a lot of people are familiar with. And so just to put that into context, like, basically it's being that safe place where someone can come, not just children, your spouse, your friends, your in-laws, that you are a safe place, that they really can be themselves with you. You're not offended by their anger. You're not taking on their depression or they're upset. So often I think we have learned to co-regulate with someone by taking on what they feel, as opposed to recognizing that I can be with. So it's really the ministry of presence, like the power of your presence with someone without the feeling that I have to fix it. I don't have to have wisdom or a great response. In fact, typically, nobody wants your response. They don't want your answer or your suggestion of even how to fix it. Even our children. There does come a place where we have this program called My Kids EQ, where it is emotion coaching kids. It is about up-leveling our kids, but it's really the whole family unit. Because like you're saying, as a parent, if you're unaware of your own baggage and your own predispositions toward things, because you'll find, maybe it's anger, maybe it's your child's anger that just, it just triggers me and I don't know why. And I would just say, be curious about that. As opposed to, we so often are quick to judge ourselves and, we either come down hard on ourselves when we become aware, like you said, I messed up again. But to just have this gentle curiosity, why is that? Where's that coming from? And let yourself be curious, because there's not a threat when you're curious. You're just trying to discover something. But so often we are in such a rushed pace of life. We're trying to just solve all our problems in 1 week and, get better and move on. It's just not the way God heals us. He heals us in such a compassionate way where it's like you're saying, we start with awareness. Oh, I did that again. Okay. I'm aware of it. I make it right. And what you'll notice is when you start to wire your brain for awareness of how you respond in relationships, you notice it the next time. It's like you buy a purple Jeep and all of a sudden you start to notice on the road all these purple Jeeps and you never noticed them before. It's just starting to wire your brain to see something it didn't see before. But that takes time. It will not be overnight. But when we start to recognize, even in our own selves, are quick to judge, are quick to, criticize our children or pick out what's wrong, or quick to anger, quick to defense, with your spouse. Like maybe you just fly into defensiveness and you're, I did that again. And again, you might not notice right away, but after you've allowed your body to calm down a little, I did that again. I'm really sorry. And you ask for forgiveness. And that, you cannot understate the importance of that healing. Like it heals. And if you think about the layered components of what that is, it's humility. It's this sense of our own, we're not walking around in pride anymore, right? Because you're asking for forgiveness. Like, we're not good at that on the daily. We're just not good at that. But just like anything, it's a muscle that has to grow, and it grows over time with use. And so I say that to encourage all of us. I'm a type A firstborn. Like, I want to just get better, move on, like be awesome, just keep growing. And then you just get totally pissed off, honestly, that you just keep messing up. And to have that eyes of grace for yourself to realize that's part of my human journey. And goodness gracious, I see that in my kids too. Man, they didn't change the first time I pointed that out in them. It's funny, I guess I don't really either. But we don't, we just don't have that grace and compassion for ourselves the way God looks at us. And that's a practice that we have to start looking for too.
Don't you love it when the Lord uses your kids as a mirror?
Oh gosh. Do we love it or do we not?
Yeah, I guess I say that facetiously.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love it. But it's such what a gift that is to us,
Yeah, it is. It is. It really is, to make us more aware of this, and seeing the things that we're just kind of inherently passing down to them by, the environment that we're creating, or how they're watching us, or how they're, obviously the old adage, more is caught than taught. It's exactly what you said earlier, Josh, that as we become better followers of Jesus, we become better parents, right? It seems so simple, right? But it is not easy, that's for sure.
The Nothing is Wasted content library of resources and podcast episodes are made possible by our growing community of members. If you would like to be a part of having a global impact and help people partner with God to take back their stories, consider joining Community Plus for just $20 a month. Your membership comes with access to a course called Position for Redemption, masterclasses taught by our certified coaches, bonus podcast episodes, and Q&As with myself and some of our other special guests. You can get more information and sign up at nothingiswasted.com/community. I look forward to connecting with you further within our Community Plus platform.
Christy, tell us a little bit about your story. I know that Josh alluded to that earlier. It seems like it's very important in the work that you guys are doing too, and how this came about.
I was, a mom of, one at the time. Landon's our firstborn, and I think I knew I always wanted to be a mom. I was so excited for that. Josh was able, to work, and I was able to stay home, and I thought that's what I wanted. And I realized I just got really lost in it. I didn't feel like a mother. It didn't come naturally to me. I was struggling, feeling left behind. I wanted to be, out living my purpose. I felt like, that's what he was doing. And I just felt left at home. And though I cherished my kids, and then number 2 came along, and both of our kids, I remember with Landon, he just cried all the time, and we had no answers for that. And friends would say, I promise this is not normal. You guys have had a really hard go. And I'd had really difficult pregnancies. I had hyperemesis gravidum, which is just extreme morning sickness. I'd throw up 30 to 40 times a day for 7 months. And
oh, goodness,
it was just really hard. Everyone's so thankful to be pregnant. And I was, and yet I wouldn't have told you at the time, but I had slipped into depression. I didn't care about anything. I was so sick. And then Kennedy came along, and she wasn't like Landon. She was worse. So she cried like you had dropped her on the floor all the time. And what I didn't know at the time was that my entire limbic system, like Josh referred to, which is just the nervous system and its response to, I was in fight or flight at all times. So then I started getting all these chronic infections, food sensitivities. My back, which I'd injured playing volleyball in college, was so bad. There was a season. I remember 3 weeks I couldn't walk.
It was a season where I'm taking care of Landon, who was 2 years old. Kennedy was 6 months old, not sleeping through the night at all, awake every 45 minutes type of sleeping through the night. And Christy is literally bedridden with a porta potty, kind of like you would see in a nursing home, right next to the bed, because her back was so incapacitated she couldn't even walk to the bathroom. So, that was we're in it.
Yeah, and Kennedy, for her first, I couldn't get her in and out of her crib. I couldn't put her in her car seat, so I was stuck at home. Josh would go out of town to speak, and I was just praying that I would be okay, because if something, my back slipped again, then one time I was literally on the floor with a toddler and a baby crying, trying to get to my phone to get him to come home. And so that was my journey. I started my parenting journey there, and I realized I was the worst version of me I'd ever been. And I don't mean just physically, emotionally. I would lose it. I would everything would come out sideways. I remember someone dropped a pot in the kitchen, and I just started bawling. I was in such a state of that trauma response where you're on edge for everything. I would burst into tears or out in anger over nothing and everything. And this was the version of me that my children knew as mom. And I remember one time I'm from Canada, and we had gone back to my parents' house, and it was like a feat just to get there. And I remember being in their guest room in their basement, and Josh just putting his hands on my shoulders and looking me straight in the eye. And he said, "I just want my wife back." And it was it hit me in that moment where I realized I was gone, and I didn't know where I'd gone. I mean, I used to be this super, high capacity. I loved me. I loved performer version of me, and I didn't know what happened to her. But she was really struggling and was really lost. And I remember Josh at one point coming home, and I describe it like he was wafting the smell of some delicious latte that he had, working at a coffee shop. He'd been having all these like great meetings, and so he comes in and he's just talking about like all these great things that he'd done and people he'd met with and projects he's working on. And I'm like teaching a kid to eat solid foods, so I'm like covered in spackled banana and sweet potato. And I just remember I just burst into tears, and I was just like, why do you never ask me what's on my heart? And it was the first time in words I had said something out loud. I didn't even realize it just came out. And I realized I just felt lost, and I felt alone, and I felt hidden. And that began our journey together, where I actually invited him in, not knowing how, but I said something and I realized I needed someone to help pull me up again and to find myself again. And so I call that season hitting the bottom rung of life, because it was. And the journey from there was this pulling. I say pulling myself up. It was the Lord pulling me up one rung at a time and me partnering with him.
And there were so many other circumstances going on in that time too. So when she said we were in Canada, we were at Christmas time, and I remember very vividly where I told her I just want my wife back. And part of that journey also was my dad had congestive heart failure. And so we had driven up to Canada. My parents, I grew up in Pennsylvania. We were about an 8-hour drive from where they were. And it would have been 4 months prior to that, my dad's heart had stopped working on its own. So he had been rushed into emergency surgery. He was in the hospital for 3 months. He had to get an LVAD put in. So it was a heart pump, and it would do the work of his heart for him. And but he had complications, he had blood clots, so he was in the hospital for 3 months during that season. This is also the same season where Christy's back is not doing great. I am struggling to figure out how to bring an income in during this process, because I'm trying to take care of the 2 kids and her in that process. And, we had gone back to Pennsylvania. We'd driven 21 hours to get back from Missouri to Pennsylvania to get to be with my dad. And then we ended up living during that season for about a month, 3 weeks or a month, with my mom and my stepdad, with with Kennedy, who was screaming, and a 2-year-old. And it was just one of those, because she had just been born. So this is like early on, like she had been born like a month prior. And
wow.
So we're in it. And so you imagine living with your in-laws in this season. I'm driving to the hospital to be with my dad as much as I can. And all of a sudden at Christmas time, we find out he's coming home, and we're 8 hours away in Canada. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he gets to meet his granddaughter. He gets to be with his granddaughter at home. I can take her down there. He can meet his granddaughter, hold his granddaughter. And this is a cool thing. But my suggestion of that to Christy, there was just, to drive 8 hours in a car to go to take, there was absolutely nothing left. And I think that's where we realized, where I said, I just want my wife back. We realized it in that moment, how far gone we were in terms of, and how far gone she was in terms of depression, and where she was on what she calls that bottom rung of life. So there was so many other circumstances going on, not just colicky kids and not sleeping kids in the back. There was a lot going on in that season of our lives. And it was so funny. I remember also in that same season, in that fall, we had this offer to this really cool, kind of like a dream job offer, that I had a dream job offer. And we flew out. We left the kids behind with my parents, and we flew with my mom and stepdad, and we flew out across the country to go for these interviews. And I remember sitting in the HR office in that season, and all of a sudden we're meeting with the head of HR, and Christy just bursts into tears. And I'm like, this.
I was a hot mess.
I'm like, this is great. Like the very first impression I want to leave with the HR is my crying wife and how much of a mess we are. And it was just it was a season, and
that's where we were.
But that's where we were. And it's so funny because it's crazy how, it's not funny, but it's there's irony it's wild that the very thing that God calls you to, he humbles you in so you don't pull your britches up too high to be like, oh, this is just how you do it, you know?
Right.
It was very difficult for us. And so that was the journey.
But I think
Because this is while you are working currently. I mean, at this point, you're working on stuff for helping families and, well, you know, people in crisis. Is that right?
Yeah, Famous at Home at that time wasn't started yet, but
were you writing Safe House at that time? I think you were.
well, I think I was writing Safe House, and so we have a book on emotional safety in kids. And the reason that I started researching that was because, we were in these trenches in these early years with our first two, and I remember just thinking, like, I know parenting's difficult, but it can't be this complicated. Like, you can't even leave the hospital before you have to make a decision about whether or not you're going to immunize your child. And we all know what that debate's like today. You get them home and you hear parenting experts describe about whether we should spank or not spank. Should we breastfeed or bottle feed? Should we co-sleep or not co-sleep? Do we do timeouts or time-ins? Because now timeouts are not appropriate. Time-ins are better. You know, it's like you're just so overwhelmed by all this parenting advice. You're not a parent for more than 5 seconds before you realize it's the most guilt-ridden, shaming task on the planet. And it's like, I was so overwhelmed by it that, and in a season we were in, that I was going, when I'm 80 years old, I'm on my rocking chair looking back at my grandkids and my kids, I want to know what would have really mattered. And so it was in that season I was digging into the research. I mean, I had a PhD in counseling. I'd done my research in the area of attachment relationships. And as I looked at the research, what I realized is that every single major outcome that we desire in our kids link back to this thing of emotional safety, this whole concept of creating an environment where our kids feel safe. But that required us to feel safe. And so that was kind of the journey that Christy started going on, was uncovering how she could feel safe within herself to then be safe. And as she said, she was the worst version of herself. You know, she didn't know how to get out of that. And so the last number that we spent years just for her coming out of that journey, and then the healing that it's had in our marriage, the healing that it's had in our whole family has just been a journey, but it's also been a beautiful thing because we're pressing into it.
And it went.
Highlight some of those shifts, guys. I mean, either one of you guys, like, what, you're talking about, you're referring to the fact that it took years for you to kind of come out, but what are some of the big milestone moments? What are some big, shifts in perspective and mindset and practice that you guys had to do in order to participate with God's healing in this part of the journey?
So I would say, first of all, I was totally alone. Wasn't that I wasn't surrounded by friends. I had a ton of friends, but I didn't let anyone into that journey. I was acting like I was fine because that's what everyone else seemed to be doing.
Everyone else seemed to be fine. Everyone else seemed to be crushing the parenting.
Yeah. Everyone else was like such a great mom, and like you're at your play date, and I would leave and I was exhausted. I was so tired of just pretending, and like how, again, even though they're really good friends, I didn't let them in. There was a shame component. And so that was probably the first thing to go, is that I decided isn't a great word. It's not like I had no other choice. It was like
you relented to or conceded to the fact.
Like, okay, I'm too tired. This is too hard. Like, I need someone to know. And it started with Josh. And he went to, well, this was funny. So maybe you can tell this part, but he asked me, as I'm on the bottom rung of life, and he traveled a ton because he speaks like for a living most of the time. So every time he'd go, just fear through my whole body. And so then he asked me, he's like, I want to go to this week-long leadership.
What I remember, so this is with John Townsend, and Dr. John Townsend wrote the book Boundaries with Henry Cloud. They've been incredible friends and mentors of mine for many, many years. And I remember John telling me, he said, Josh, if you just go to this, and he told Christy this too. He said, if you let him come for a week to this, it will pay dividends 10 years from now. So just, and so it was funny because it was scheduled right around the time that she said to me, why don't you ever ask me about what's on my heart? And so I left her for a week with the kids because I guess that's what good husbands do. And you just get out of Dodge. I'm totally kidding. But I went out there for a week, and it was an ultimate leadership retreat. And so you learn about leadership. And I remember them talking about the power of emotion, and great leaders not just talking about content-based conversation where you're talking about the business of the day, but process-based conversation, how you feel about the business of the day. And I remember leaving there and going, I can't be a great leader until I'm first a great leader at home and leading my wife's heart. She had just left me with this, why don't you ever ask me about what's on my heart? And I remember coming home and just saying to her, Christy, I don't know how to claw our way out of this thing, but I do know that in order to be a great leader, one of the things that I learned was that we need to start talking about emotion. We need to bring emotion into, I was working on this emotional safety research, and I was, looking at going to this, I was at this retreat, I'm learning about all this research on emotions and verbalizing your emotions. And, from a biblical perspective, when we become one flesh, well, the Bible, first of all, says in Proverbs to guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. And I think when we become one flesh in marriage, we have one marital heart that we need to guard. And so my ability to fight for Christy's heart is critical to how the wellspring of our lives, of our marriage, of our home, and how everything else goes. And so I had to realize, like, even when we were arguing, when she was short, when she was, when I was feeling like, between a rock and a hard place, with everything, I had to stop getting defensive, and I had to start entering into her world and see what was going on. And so I came home and I just said, Christy, I would love to practice this. And we now do it with coaching clients, where we call it 15 minutes a day, where we just started, instead of talking about the business of the day, we would share one positive emotion and one uncomfortable emotion that we felt that day. And that wasn't necessarily towards one another. It was just even in neutral situations. Like, I felt happy, content. I felt excited. I felt joyful. I felt brave today doing X, Y, or Z, or when this happened. And then one uncomfortable emotion. And we use uncomfortable instead of negative because we think that, I believe that every emotion is God-given. And it's what you do with it that makes it positive or negative. But when you take an uncomfortable emotion and you use it, you can use it to enhance relationship and have deeper connection with those that you love. And so what's one uncomfortable emotion that you felt? I was sad, I was jealous, I was embarrassed, I was alone. Christy, lonely a lot, feel alone. And what it does is it helps give insight into your spouse's heart and what's going on in their inner world. And you don't have to make it weird. You don't have to, you can do it while you're unloading the dishwasher. You can, if you need to, start by sending a text message instead of doing it face to face. I mean, ultimately the goal would be to get to be doing it face to face, but just start. Just do it. It'll feel awkward at first, but just start, and it'll become normal conversation. To just verbalize a feeling word in your day is just critical to getting into the heart of what's happening in the inner world of your spouse and your kids.
And why that was so powerful for me is it started to organize what I was experiencing, because so many of us are numb, right? When you're gone through trauma, whatever that looks like, physical, emotional, spiritual trauma even, there is this stunned, like, we freeze. And so we actually become numb to emotion. We don't know what we felt because we have learned how to tamp it down for so long that it's not until it comes out sideways do we realize, it's even there. But we've numbed the whole range of emotion, like positive and negative. We tried to just numb out the anger or the grief, and we've numbed out all the positive emotion as well. And so for me, it was actually this organization, which is why it's so powerful to do with kids. We have a book called What Am I Feeling, with a feelings chart in the back, a pull-out feelings chart you can put on, your fridge or in your kid's bedroom. And the number of adults that we hear, teenagers that are like, oh my gosh, I need this. Because we all do. We all need to see what an emotion looks like in a face and be able to recognize, oh, I felt sad today. I felt left out. I felt like we're just not good at recognizing our body feels it, but we are not aware of it. And so to be able to start to organize my life by saying it out loud to someone who loved me and saying, like, I felt alone today. I felt hopeless. I felt discouraged. I felt frustrated. Say it, and it organizes it in your brain, which actually calms the brain. And it starts to bring your story back together. And so, I mean, genuinely, that yes, did I go to, I have a great counselor. I went to an intensive at one point, but that was that was years later, honestly. And I'm not saying to not put into place all those things, but I know when you're in that overwhelm, trying to find a counselor, trying to get to an intensive, you don't even have the energy to do that. And so I say to you, like, 15 minutes a day, and we have it laid out. We talk about it in our podcast, but we have it laid out in our book, Famous at Home, as well, because it's the most practical, helpful.
Yeah.
Like it, and we just call, like, especially with our coaching client, like, what do you say? Like, if you don't practice, you can't play the field.
Oh, I mean, if
It's
you're
like-
a baseball player, right? Like, you know the fundamentals of baseball. Like, if you're going to field a ground ball, you better be following that ball into your mitt with your other hand, or catching it with two hands, a fly ball.
Right.
Like, those are the fundamentals. And if you don't practice the fundamentals, you're not going to see the field. And so I tell all of our coaching clients, if you're not practicing 15 minutes a day, you're not going to see the field. You're not going to see the progress that you would see if you were practicing the fundamentals. And I think that's
And I think it speaks to just the kindness and the beauty of God and the way he heals us. It's not always that complicated. Sometimes it's literally just putting a name to how you feel. But it started this process. It wasn't just like I did it once, because it comes out in an outburst, and then we stuff it down and just go numb for like a month, and then it comes out again. It was daily practice of just saying a couple things, and you're getting more comfortable with that. Again, becoming a little more aware, and you start to notice things you were totally oblivious to. And it not only drew us together as our marriage got so connected again, because it was like, I see you. And then I can also, because I'm aware of the journey. I'm aware that you've been, worried about finances. Like, those were things like maybe he wouldn't have said to me before, because he's trying to just, again, with our false selves, we put on this really great mask and act like we're good when we're not. And the beauty of how deeply healing it is to be fully seen and fully known and fully loved. Like, you can't.
Wow.
That heals a lot of wounds. And
It really does.
And then to be able to offer that presence and that practice to your children and to your friends, and it starts to change circles. And
I would, and I just want to add one other too. I think one of the things I saw Christy do really, really well early on, you were talking about markers, like what were some key markers?
Yeah.
I think one of the things I saw Christy do really, really well early from the very beginning was saying yes to people who offered to help. So once she started verbalizing this, being able to, like, in humility, saying yes to help. And I remember it started when I was speaking and I was sharing illustrations about how, difficult things were for us. And this one woman at our church had come up to me, and to this day, I still think of her as like what a godsend she was in that moment, where she just said, she pulled Christy aside and she said, it was with our daughter, with Kennedy, and, 'cause she was crying all the time. And she said, have you done any food allergy tests? And she's only like 6 months old at the time. And we were, and the other aspect of this is Christy had a real hard time breastfeeding. So that brought more shame. And so our daughter's on formula. And so this woman Christy just was like, yes, just tell me everything you know. And all of a sudden, we flipped to goat milk. Christy started learning to not eat gluten, just changing her own diet, and then changing the diet of our daughter, and just things that we didn't know, even in terms of how we ate.
Yeah.
That just started to shift. So it was this holistic type of thing. It wasn't just emotional. It was physical. It was emotional. It was spiritual. But it all happened. So there were physiotherapists throughout this journey. There were therapists throughout this journey. There were coaches. There's all these things that Christy went through, that I went through as well with her, that in my own therapy as well. But it was because we said yes to people who were willing to help. And I think that is one of the biggest things that I would encourage people to go, wow, okay, yes, you're willing to help me. I want help. Like, teach me what you know.
Because, I think that's the thing, like, the Lord will send the people that you need right now.
That's it.
Versus this overwhelm of like, I don't know where to go for help. Like a sweet lady in the church who just comes up out of nowhere. And I could have just been like, thank you, because everyone has advice. Like, I had billions of people trying to tell me, like, have you tried this? Have you tried this? But just pay attention to those glimmers of where, like, the Holy Spirit is showing up right in front of you. And it's like, this is the next right step. And that, if I can encourage, like, that is the next right step. That is all you're looking for. This will not heal overnight. And it's just not the way that we've been designed to. But the Lord has
so good.
set out the next right step. And you just obey that. And then the next one, but it is from a posture of humility. The pride had to go of, I've got this, or, I can't let people into this. People want to be let in. People desperately want to know how to help and they want to know you. Like Josh wanted to know me. My friends wanted to know me. I just wasn't letting them. And I don't even shame myself for that. I didn't know how I felt. I didn't know what to let them into. I was so unaware. I was in survival. And so if you feel in survival, that's where 15 minutes is the gentle icebreaker to get you into a sense of, how am I right now, actually?
Wow. That's so paramount what you're saying right there, because I feel like so many people, we say this a lot, that God sometimes heals in poof, but most of the time he heals in process. And I think people are just kind of waiting for this moment where it's like God just descends from heaven and there's this huge, massive encounter at a worship service or on the floor of their bedroom. And it's just like, boom, I'm healed. It's this major experience thing. And that doesn't happen for most people. For most people, it's just a little subtle shift in mindset, right? Where you begin to open your eyes up and open your heart up to the next thing that God wants to bring into your life.
And I think that's I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't.
Go ahead.
I think,
well, I was just gonna say that's the thing that God does. He starts to bring exactly what you're saying. These people, like, and these resources and these things. It's like, oh, because he has us on a linear journey. It's like, I can't bring all of it to you until this one thing is shored up, and then that's a foundational thing for the next thing.
That's so good. I think I remember a number of years ago, as a younger man in my 20s, I was looking at what character meant. And in scripture, it's like you get this bum deal because in order to, in Romans 5, it says to rejoice in suffering. With suffering comes perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope. And that whole idea of character, it's like it's such a bum deal because the only way we can really develop character is through the process of suffering. But Paul's right, like, be joyful in it. Be joyful in your sufferings as you journey, because what it's producing in you is the fruit that is, and to me, I think, in Western America, in our Western world, we have this instant gratification. It's like we have to be healed, we have to be whole. It's like we get everything at the click of a button. We just get what we want in front of us, and suffering doesn't work that way. God didn't. And he loves us so much. He didn't design it to work that way, because what he's producing in us is so much more beautiful than what can be given to you in the click of a finger.
Wow. That's so good. So, as you guys, and maybe you can share this anecdotally or experientially, or maybe you can share it just from a practical standpoint, but, as people are finding healing themselves, as parents are particularly, and they're becoming a safe space for each other, how do you then go and translate that to your kids and create this entire environment of these practices in your home?
Yeah. I think it's one of the most beautiful things. It's almost effortless. And I don't want to say it doesn't require intention, but it's like you said, it's more is caught than taught. And they watch mom and dad. They watch how mom is different. They watch how mom is asking for forgiveness quicker, because I still have to ask for forgiveness a whole lot, but I'm much quicker now. I can catch myself in the middle of a outburst or in the middle of a criticism, and I'm like, sorry, I'm so sorry, honey. I did that again. And mommy is really working on that. And I've brought my kids into part of my journey, and to do that in a really safe way, right? Where you are still bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind. I am not putting the weight of it on them, but I am showing them in an appropriate way that I am a growing person just like them. And so I still have a lot of things to grow in. A lot.
Wow.
And I'm letting them into that. Like my son the other day was like, Mom, you've gotten a lot better at that. Like for your kid to tell you. I was like, thank you so much. You see, I really am working at it so that I'm not, I think it used to be this top down, mom, and like, you kids, like you need, the kids are very aware of what you want them to work on. Like we really harp on that a lot as parents, and yet they don't see it often the other way, where like they're actually helping mom and dad's journey. Again, not where the weight of it is on them, and not where they see us as not capable of taking care of them, but just that I'm humble enough to let them into my fold. And my goodness, once you get there, the weight that takes off of you as a parent, that perfectionism, that sense of, I have to have a right answer, I have to solve my kids' problems. The beauty of just letting, and we do this 15 minutes with the kids too. You can do it around the dinner table where, one uncomfortable emotion, one positive emotion, as opposed to just doing a high-low of the day. It gets you into the heart of your kids where you realize, they felt rejected at the lunch table. They felt, really afraid or super brave. Like our son just, was super scared about, we do homeschool, but they go to a 2-day-a-week little school and they had a science test. He was just crippled with fear. And to walk that process through with him where he actually lets me in now on the backside of it, as opposed to you just seeing it come out sideways in their behavior. He was just really nervous about the test. And then he crushed it, and we got to celebrate that journey. And he realized, A, letting people in is not a scary thing. And B, I can do really hard things, and there's people there to support me. And I think, again, it's not like this formulaic thing. It's this lived out thing where I'm doing it and I'm letting them into my journey. And then I'm hopefully proving to them I'm a safe enough place that they'll let me into theirs.
Yeah, and I would say too, in addition to that, my friend Jordan Raynor talks about this whole idea, and it was the first time I'd ever really heard of it, but unipresence. I think so often we try to be omnipresent with our phones and quick, and all that type of thing. But your unipresence, your ability to be truly present in one place at one time in one moment. And even through my own discovering my inner child and doing inner child work and things like that, I think, there was something that when Jesus said, unless you become like one of these little children, you will not enter the kingdom of God. I think there's something about becoming childlike that is really, really important. And so for me, we opened up this episode talking about the chase and how so often we have a chase. And every one of us, I think, has a chase. And there's an idol. There's something we're trying to chase, whether that is in your job, whether that's, accolades, whether that's, more money, whether it's more notoriety, whatever that is, more followers on social media, whatever it is. Or maybe your chase is more like Christy's is I just want to get better. I just want to be healthier. And your mind is like in this whirlwind of like guilt and shame, and I just want to be better. This chase is what prevents us from being truly present in the moment with our kids. You see it in The Greatest Showman, where P.T. Barnum is on the rooftop. There's this moment where he's on the rooftop and his daughters are dancing. He's with his wife and they're dancing through the sheets, and it's just really sweet moment where he's physically there, but in his mind, he's not there because he's chasing, he wants to prove his father-in-law wrong. He wants to become big. He wants to have, right? And so you can just see he's not there. His mind's not there. And I think one of the things that Dr. Stanley Greenspan has found in his research, he started this practice called floor time, where you enter into your child's world for 20 minutes a day, command-free time. You don't command the play. And I just, one of the things that I have found for me in my life, where I just put my cell phone away, I put it into another room where I can't hear it, I can't know what's going on, and I just enter into my child's world. If that means I'm on the island of Sodor playing Thomas the Train, if that means I'm, playing Polly Pockets, if that means I'm playing Dollhouse, whatever it is, I'm entering, or a board game or something of that nature, where I'm in their space. And yes, it will take sometimes 10, 15 minutes for you to turn your own brain off.
Wow.
But I'm telling you, when you do, an hour can go by and you realize that was the most fun part of your entire day, was losing yourself in a game with your kids. And I just really want to encourage parents. It's as simple and complicated as that. It's complicated because it's hard to shut your brain down and turn off the chase.
Right.
But it's as simple as sitting with your kids and just being truly present with them and what they're doing and entering their world, because the very thing they desire the most is you. They just desire your time. They want you. They don't want you on your phone. They don't want the you that's, busy and having your to-do list. They want just you. And there's no one else in the world that can replace you. And so I think it's as simple as starting there.
Man, wow. This is so convicting for me, I know. And some of these things are just great reminders, but, I know you guys are, I'm sure you speak Enneagram. I'm a 3. So what you're talking about, Josh, is, I am goal-oriented, achievement-oriented, always have been, just wired that way.
Yep.
it was really helpful to have language for that when I began to study the Enneagram. I was like, oh, this is why I'm wired this way. And I'm also very relationally driven, right? And so that is in constant conflict when it comes to my kids, because I'm like, oh, I'm taking the hill, but I'm also, oh my gosh, I feel so bad because I don't feel like I'm ever creating space and margin enough for this time to be fully present. And so this has just been super helpful for me to think about that in terms of our family has a lot of healing that still needs to happen. And that's only going to happen to the extent that we are creating this space to be safe places for each other and to be able to get emotionally curious. That takes time, but that's how God rushes in and heals us.
And I would just say, I love the way you concluded that. You wrapped that up there. I would just say too, this is a journey to invite your entire family on. Like you talk about, like there's nothing more powerful than giving your entire family a purpose and your kids having purpose. And when the entire family is on that same journey at the same time and you're inviting your kids on that journey with you, there's this sense of greater purpose that your family is offering the world, because you're offering the world. Yes, you're not perfect. None of us are, but we're offering the world a fresh version of who we are. And we're helping people grow in our own growth, because at some point they're going to look at your lives and they're going to go, man, we want what they have. We want what they're doing. And you're vicariously, you don't even realize it. You're a missionary for your family becomes missionaries and you don't even realize it.
Right. Man. Oh, so good. So good. Guys, we're going to have you on so many other times. Let's do some more stuff together, because this has been so helpful for me and so helpful for, I know, the folks who are listening to our community. I'm just so grateful that you guys would spend some time with us today and share. We just scratched the surface. I'm like, man, there's so much more I want to talk about.
It keeps circling my brain, so I feel like the Holy Spirit. Just to encourage Davey, I think, and so many other families out there, I think, especially, if you're Enneagram 3, if you know that language, if you are driven, you have vision, you love to accomplish stuff, I think so often we have such clear vision for business, ministry, finances, all those things, but we lack vision for our family. And it makes sense then. There's no home, playing another game of Chutes and Ladders. If you don't have a vision beyond it, why would you want to, that totally makes sense. So that's what we, help coach families through through Famous at Home is to set mission, vision, family values. So once you have that, so if you just, to you or to whomever is listening, it just feels kind of, just stuck in that place. Just know, for lack of vision, that people perish. I think a lot of people are perishing within the walls of their own home because they just don't have a vision for their family. But God has it for you. He's written your story. He's putting you, every single member of that family in that home for a reason, on purpose. And there is there's destiny for you. There is people waiting for your family to fulfill a vision that's so unique to you. It's an imprint no one else can replicate. And so once I think you catch a little of that vision or fire, straight from the Holy Spirit, into your family, that changes the desire, to put your phone away doesn't feel like such a sacrifice, or to put work aside doesn't feel like, oh, okay. It just feels like, oh, I'm home. This is my purpose. This is my greater purpose. And so I say that because I know, and I was there, and I think that's one of the greatest lies of the enemy, is that the family lacks that forward momentum and vision and purpose that God has instilled in us to live out. So.
Right. That's so good. That's so good. Family has always been God's primary means for building the kingdom.
Yep.
Right.
Household.
It's been the household.
Household.
I think we've got to, as a church, I think that's going to be the major shift. We have to go, there's a renewal of that's coming. And I'm so grateful for what you guys are doing to lead the way in that renewal.
Yep. That is something, I come into agreement with that, Nathan. Yep.
Well, we want to make sure all of you guys check out Josh and Christy's work, their podcast, Famous at Home podcast. We'll put the link in the show notes right here. And then Famous at Home, the book that you guys have just recently released. I want to make sure that we get that link in there as well. Is there any other place that we can follow what you guys are doing and just come along the journey?
Just famousathome.com. It's where you can find everything that we're doing, whether it's coaching intensives or, as you said, the podcast, or some of our children's books and resources. So it's all at that one place. So, and again, Davey, I just want to thank you. Thank you for having us on and the time. It's truly an honor to be with you.
Man, it has been such an honor to be with you guys, and I'm looking forward to hanging out with you guys some more. So
yeah,
I really appreciate the time.
Needed up some baseball games.
That's right. Hey, listen, I fly into Philly a couple of times a year. Here's what we're going to do.
Man.
We're going to meet in Philly. We're going to go to a game together.